Oh my. The sound of the slap was so loud it silenced the entire room. Home. 1 second we were passing plates around the dinner table, pretending to be a normal family. The next, my daughter's face snapped to the side, her hand flying to her cheek, her eyes wide in shock. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the clinking of silverware stopped midair. Derek didn't look angry. That's what chilled me the most. He looked annoyed, like she had spilled a drink on his shirt instead of questioning him about $50,000 missing from their savings. And then his mother laughed. And then his mother laughed. Not nervous laughter, not disbelief. A cold, satisfied chuckle. My daughter. The little girl I once carried on my shoulders. The kid who used to run to me crying over scraped knees. Stood there frozen, humiliated in front of her own family. A red mark was already forming on her cheek. Her eyes met mine for just a second. She wasn't asking me to fight him. Derek leaned back in his chair like he had just made a point in a debate. Maybe now you'll stop questioning me, he muttered. It's my money, too. The $50,000 she had saved for years. The money meant for a down payment on their first home. The money she told me earlier that week had somehow disappeared from their joint account. He said it was an investment. He couldn't explain where it went. And now he thought a slap would end the conversation. The rest of the table stayed quiet. You could almost see the calculation in their faces. Don't interfere. It's a marriage issue, not our business. But it was my business. I didn't shout. I didn't flip the table like every instinct in my body wanted me to. Instead, I slowly folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady. That's when I knew Derek had made the worst mistake of his life. He thought I was just an old man, a retired father who spent his days gardening and complaining about back pain. He thought I would react emotionally, maybe throw a punch, maybe yell. He had no idea that for 25 years I built cases against men exactly like him. Men who thought intimidation was power. Men who believed no one was watching. Men who thought they could take what wasn't theirs and silence anyone who objected. I stood up slowly and excused myself from the table. No one tried to stop me. Derek smirked like he had just won something. Outside, the night air was cool, calm, almost peaceful. Inside, my daughter was wiping tears from her face while her husband poured himself another drink with the same hand he had just used to strike her. I pulled out my phone. For a moment, I looked at her name in my contacts. I wanted to call her. I wanted to tell her it was going to be okay. But she didn't need comfort right now. So instead, I scrolled further down to a number I hadn't dialed in years. When the line connected, the voice on the other end said, "It's been a while," and looked back at the house, at the man inside who thought fear was control. And I said, very calmly, I think we have a problem. Garrick had no idea who I used to be. And he had absolutely no idea what was about to happen next. I didn't go back inside right away. I stood there in the driveway, listening to the muffled sound of voices through the dining room window. My former colleague didn't ask unnecessary questions. He never did. I gave him Derek's full name, date of birth, and what little I knew about the missing $50,000. He told me he'd call me back. That was enough. When I walked back into the house, the atmosphere had shifted into that uncomfortable normal people force after something ugly happens. Plates were being cleared. Someone had turned on the television in the living room to drown out the silence. Derek was laughing too loudly at something on his phone, as if the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. My daughter avoided my eyes. I sat down beside her and gently touched her hand. It was cold. She whispered that she was fine. I knew she wasn't. I also knew pushing her in that moment would only make her retreat further into him. A breeze doesn't start with fists, it starts with isolation. We left shortly after. On the drive home, my wife asked if we should have done more. I told her we were going to. The next morning, my phone rang. The Financial Crimes Unit had pulled preliminary records. The $50,000 hadn't been invested in any legitimate business. It had been wired in 2 transfers to an LLC registered 3 months earlier. The company had no website, no employees, no tax filings. The registered address, a mailbox in another state. The name tied to the LLC wasn't Derek's, but Derek was listed as an authorized signatory on the receiving account. That alone wasn't enough for an arrest, but it was enough for a deeper look. I spent the next few days doing what I used to do best, observing without being seen. I asked my daughter simple questions over coffee. Had Derek been stressed lately? Was he traveling more? Did he guard his phone? She hesitated before answering each time. That told me more than the words did. She finally admitted he had been going to business meetings twice a week. Late at night, he said investors preferred privacy. I asked her if she had ever met one of these investors. When I requested copies of their joint bank statements, she apologized like she was doing something wrong. That broke my heart more than the slap. The statements showed a pattern. Smaller transfers over the past year, 5,000 here, 3,000 there, always labeled as consulting fees, always sent to accounts that funneled into the same LLC. 50,000 wasn't the beginning. It was just the largest amount. My phone rang again that afternoon. The LLC Derek was using had been flagged in a broader investigation involving wire fraud and illegal online gambling operations. Money was being pulled through shell companies, then routed offshore. It was sophisticated enough to avoid casual detection, but sloppy enough to leave a trail for anyone patient. Derek wasn't some criminal mastermind. He was a middleman. That meant 2 things. That once was in deeper than my daughter knew. Second, he was likely desperate. Desperate men escalate. I drove to their house unannounced that evening. Derek answered the door, surprised but polite. He always played polite in front of me. He offered me a drink. I declined. My daughter was in the kitchen. Her cheek had faded from red to faint pink, but I could still see the outline if I looked closely. I asked Derek directly about the investment. He smiled and said paperwork was coming. He spoke in rehearsed sentences, like he had practiced them in the mirror. I let him talk. The more someone lies, the more they reveal. When I mentioned the LLC by name, his smile twitched. Just slightly. That was all I needed. These things can get messy if filings aren't done properly. He laughed. Too quick. Everything's legal. I hope so, I replied. That night, my colleague confirmed what I suspected. The broader investigation was ready to move. They had been building a case for months but needed stronger links between certain participants. Derek's recent large transfer had triggered internal alerts. They didn't need me to push. They just needed time. I wanted to pull her out immediately. But if I stormed in with accusations before charges were filed, Derek could drain remaining funds, destroy evidence, or worse, take his anger out on her. So I focused on protection. I convinced her to come stay with us for a few days under the excuse of helping her mother with something. She resisted at first. Then she quietly packed a bag. Derek didn't object. That worried me more than if he had. 3 days later, agents executed warrants at multiple locations connected to the operation. Derek was at home when they arrived. I wasn't there, but I was told how it unfolded. He opened the door expecting a package delivery. Instead, he found badges. They searched his office first. Laptops, external drives, financial records. Then they read him his rights. He kept repeating that it was a misunderstanding, that he was just an investor. But investors don't sign authorization forms for shell companies used to route fraudulent funds. His mother arrived halfway through the search, furious and loud. She demanded to know who had reported him. She insisted her son was being targeted. No one answered her. because it wasn't personal. It was evidence. When my daughter got the call, she didn't cry. She just sat very still on her couch, staring at the wall. I didn't know, she kept whispering. Over the next week, more details surfaced. Derek had accumulated significant gambling debt 2 years into the marriage. Instead of admitting it, he had joined an acquaintance who promised easy money through consulting funnels. At first, it was small commissions for moving funds between accounts. Then it escalated to recruiting others and using joint marital assets to cover shortfalls. The slap wasn't about disrespect. She had unknowingly threatened the structure holding up his lies. Charges were filed: wire fraud, conspiracy, financial theft. Additional domestic disturbance reports from a previous relationship surfaced during background review. At the preliminary hearing, Derek finally looked at me without arrogance. There was something close to fear in his eyes. "You did this," he said quietly as deputies escorted him past. I met his gaze evenly. "No," I replied. "You did." The legal process moved slowly, but steadily. Assets were frozen. Investigators worked to recover as much money as possible. Not all of it would come back. That's the reality of financial crime. But some did. My daughter filed for divorce within the month. The first night she slept peacefully under our roof, she apologized again for bringing trouble into our lives. I told her something I wish she had understood years earlier. Protecting you is not trouble, it's my job. In quote, recovery isn't dramatic, it's quiet. Therapy appointments, long conversations, rebuilding confidence piece by piece. She started meeting friends she hadn't seen in months. She laughed more. The tension in her shoulders slowly eased. As for me, I returned to my garden, to morning coffee on the porch, to the appearance of an ordinary retired man. But there's something people misunderstand about men who spent decades in federal service. We retire from the badge, not from the instinct. Derek thought power meant control. He thought intimidation could replace integrity. He believed that if he raised his voice loudly enough or his hand fast enough, no one would challenge him. He was wrong, and because real power is quiet. Him watches. Him, it waits. Him, it waits. Him, when the moment comes, it doesn't explode in anger. Him, it makes one call. Him, the house feels different now. Quieter, lighter. For the first time in a long time, my daughter walks into a room without looking over her shoulder. She doesn't flinch when a door closes too loudly. She doesn't rush to silence her phone out of fear that someone will question who's calling. Healing didn't happen overnight, but it started the moment she realized she wasn't alone. People have asked me if I feel satisfied, if seeing Derek in handcuffs gave me closure. The truth is, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. Relief that the truth surfaced before things got worse. Relief that the slap at the dinner table didn't turn into something darker months later. Relief that my daughter saw who he really was before children were involved, before the financial damage became irreversible, before fear became her normal. Abuse thrives in silence. Fraud survives on intimidation. Derek relied on both. He believed shame would keep her quiet. He believed pride would keep me out of it. He mistook patience for weakness. He learned the difference. But this story was never about destroying him. It was about protecting her. There's a difference. I didn't ruin his life. I didn't frame him. I didn't twist facts or bend rules. I simply refused to ignore what I saw. For 25 years, I built cases against men who thought they were untouchable. The pattern was always the same. Control the narrative. Control the victim. Control the money. And if anyone questions you, intimidate them. What they never expect is someone who stays calm. Someone who doesn't threaten. Someone who quietly gathers facts. If there's one thing I've learned, both as an agent and as a father, it's this. Real strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to shout to prove a point. It doesn't swing fists at a dinner table. It protects. My daughter is rebuilding now, slowly, carefully, on her own terms. And when she laughs, really laughs, I know we did the right thing. That night, Derek thought he won because no one stood up and punched him. He had no idea the most dangerous response is silence followed by action.